and welcome to another exciting adventure on Riding Through the Unknown. I'm your host, Michael, and before I introduce our guest, I want to take a quick moment and just remind everyone as we go through all these episodes and everybody's sharing their experiences, I share mine. That's what they are. They're our experiences. We're not asking anyone to believe us or to rally behind us. We're just sharing information. So if you like the information, please click the like button. Help us out with the shows, with the algorithms. And if you don't, bless you. And I hope you find a show that you do like. And we're always here if you change your mind. With that being said, I am so privileged and blessed to have this guest coming on to the show, making her first appearance. And I cannot wait for you all to hear what she has to share. So I am going to turn it over to the one, the only, amazing Olivia James.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on and being a guest.
Thank you. I guess I can start if you want me to. I can start where I usually do. Um, so when I start a show talking about just like my story, I always start at the beginning because it was so important for me to have this origin and to find the origin of how all this started out and how it all happened to me. So that's why I always start at the beginning because it's the most important part to me, how I came to be in the programs and that kind of thing. So I always say that I had very interesting parents. So at a very young age, my father, pretty much right out of high school, was recruited into military intelligence. He was stationed on the German-Russian border, and he learned German in a very short time where he was trained at. And he was a code breaker, and they did a lot of like intelligence work there. When he came out of the intelligence, he kind of got wrapped up. I don't want to say wrapped up because I feel like he had more choice in it than we probably know. He started working with, we consider them cartels now, but the time when he was working with them, they weren't necessarily called cartels. They were kind of like a crime syndicate, things like that. So, and if anybody knows anything about the cartels in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of research that shows that they were heavily involved with a lot of various three-letter agencies and that kind of thing. And anyone can go and research that and look that up and find that information. It's not anything new. So he was doing a lot of major drug trafficking. It wasn't just like something minor. And he was working with these cartels in Mexico. So what his role was to do was to bring large amounts of heroin back and forth across the border. And he would do it by various ways, boat, train, bus, and he was also a pilot, so he could fly. So things were going really well. He met my mother. They had a couple of kids. I was just a baby when this was all going on. And she was his partner, and she was doing a lot of the money laundering with him. And she was very young herself. She kind of just followed directions, that kind of thing. But they were making a lot of money at a very young age. And, something like that is not going to do well for young people, if you know what I mean. So they kept going. He was doing all this. And what happened was he became addicted to his own product. So he became kind of like a liability for them. He was missing drops, he was missing meetings and things. Things weren't going the well because his addiction had taken over, and he was doing a lot of things that he hadn't done before. So that kind of got him in trouble with these groups that were in power. And they were trying to scare him a little. So they were doing these they did one, like, I don't know, it was a raid, but it was more like something to scare him. And nothing happened. Nothing came out of that. And he really didn't change. He could, if anybody knows anything about addiction, it was really difficult for him. So the second time he got raided, they had gotten tired of, his nonsense kind of. And this second raid was really bad. And he was looking at serving probably life in prison for what he was doing. And there was, in our small town, there was a huge public trial. There was pictures of him in the newspapers, constant articles. It was a really big thing. It was a really big deal back in those days. And this was like early 70s. And like I said, he looked like he was going to go to prison for a long time. And as the trial went on, towards the end of the trial, before he was going to go to prison and be sentenced, something happened, and he just was let go. They just literally just said, "We have the wrong person," and he was released. And they actually gave him a government job. So they hired a known drug trafficker and heroin addict for a local government position. So I thought that was really interesting. And anybody can look at that and see that that's not a normal thing. That's not normal for somebody for that to happen. So, and what I was finding out through all my discoveries, I recently actually, my awakening has only been for about, I want to say, less than 5 years, from what I've really had memories rushing in and really made a lot of discoveries and a lot of hard work, a lot of healing to go into finding all this information. A lot of my abilities started to come back. And that's, part of the reason how I got so much information is from what I can do now, and not do, but what I've rediscovered I could do. So a lot of the information I have from my father is because he's passed away. He's passed away for a long time now. So how I've gotten so much information is because I'm something of a remote viewer, a trance medium, which I call spirit hosting. And I've been able to host my own father and let him speak through me and give me this information about exactly what had happened, even though I knew what had happened because my mother's still alive and she was able to tell me all this, the information that she has. But to get details from his own perspective about what was going on in his life, it was very important for me to have that. And it was a gift for me for him to, when he comes to me, he is able to speak in his earth language, meaning that he can speak in the personality he had when he was here on earth. And that was really important to have that. Like I said, it's a gift. No matter what he said about me or how he felt about me at that time, it was a gift to me to hear that because I needed the truth, and that was the most important thing to me. So once he had that happen, I found out that the reason why he was able to stay out of prison is because he made a kind of like an exchange. And what they wanted was, one of his children, that was me. And he was able to sign me over for the programs in order to stay out of prison. And in his way, he thought that he was doing a good thing for doing that because he was saving everybody else. He got to have a normal life, but, he lost everything in terms of monetary value. He had nothing left, but, he got to live a normal life and not be in prison, but all the money was gone. Everything he had like that was really gone. And all he had to do was, hand me over to them. And he said, he said that he didn't know, well, when he was speaking through me, he said he didn't know exactly what they were doing to me because whenever he would let me go and I would come back from one of the program visits, that I looked normal, that I didn't speak, that I didn't cry, nothing. He couldn't tell what was wrong with me. And that's, a sign of like mind control, MK Ultra. Of course, I'm not going to speak or say anything because, that's how we're trained. So around age 7, is actually when I got very much introduced into, a distinct MK Ultra program. And this took place at a psychiatric hospital on the East Coast. This particular hospital isn't open anymore. So I'm sure if some people wanted to do research, they could kind of narrow it down. So at this hospital, I only remember going there when I was about 7. I remember I had pigtails in my hair that day. I was wearing these little jeans, a little sweater. And when I got there, I saw a woman come out of the building, and this was the main programmer for my program. And she had white hair that she would pin up on the sides, and she always wear these really nice pantsuits. And it just wasn't, she just wasn't the type of person I grew up around. I grew up in a particular type of neighborhood, based on, my father's activities. We grew up in a particular type of situation, lifestyle, that kind of thing. So she was different from what I was used to. So I mean, and I wasn't afraid of her. She didn't harm me physically herself, but in the programs, it's so conflicting what they do to us, and they do it purposely, especially when it's me. It was me and another boy. His name was Jacob, and what they were trying to do is she was particularly trying to get measurements for a process called syncopated dissociation, which they wanted me and this other child they wanted real evidence that we could both dissociate at the same time, and what kind of scientific outcome that would be based on that, what measurements could be taken, things like that, based on our dissociation at the same time. So they were putting us into, you know, various activities at the same time. And I kind of coined this stuff as systematic abuse, because the activities would change every 15 minutes. It was almost like a school classroom. And it wasn't like an activity where it was a happy activity. They were like psychological, physical, mental, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse, in order to create the process they were trying to reach, these specific outcomes. So the programmer, she was using LSD, electroshock therapy, and lots of hypnosis. And the hypnosis is kind of where they really found a lot of the information that they wanted, and they made really great discoveries, with hypnosis for me and this other boy named Jacob. And I had no idea that I could go as deep and as far as I could with hypnosis. I had no idea until I was older that that was a thing that I could do. So during these times of, you know, trauma, they were trying to break down our psyches as children and rebuild us into what they wanted to be, what they wanted us to be, and what they could think of for future jobs, future missions that they might need us for, any different agencies that would want to contract, with us for. So me and this little boy, we became what they called prize pupils and successful in this program, which meant that we took to the abuse. And after a while, we did not show any response emotionally or physically. We stopped wanting anything. We stopped asking to eat. We stopped asking to go to the bathroom. We didn't speak really. And from what I remember, we had pushed our speech so far back into our minds, we wouldn't speak, that I feel like me and this little boy had a connection other ways, using our minds to connect, because we were doing so much activities and pushing ourselves into such a deep dissociation that we were almost opening other senses, in order to interact. And I remember the one time that I saw him having fun is when I saw him leave his body. We were both in a room on these tables, and they were doing different torture techniques, electroshock and things like that. And I remember seeing this little boy leave his body, and I thought it was funny that he was running around the room while I could see his physical body in the bed, but his little spirit was running around the room, having fun and playing. It was like the only time that we could be kids is when we were able to dissociate, because the rest of the time the program was so focused on torture. This was in the early days of trauma-based mind control, and that was their tactic for what they wanted us to be. So we ended up being successful in that program. I think I was there for about 6 months. If I ask my family, they don't really remember me leaving, but I did ask my mother one time if she ever saw me leave when I was a child, and she said it was possible. That was the only answer I got. So who knows how it came to be in her mind that she didn't recognize that I left, or how did this happen? That was her only answer. It's possible that I left. She doesn't remember. So who knows what kind of control was happening there. But there was other things that happened after I was returned, because I was 7 years old, and they really, I don't really talk about it too much, but they did a lot of kind of like, they had us at that age entertaining certain, older gentlemen for a short time, not a long time. And it was mainly for recording, because one of the altars I had was a recorder. So when we're thinking about recording, I'm not literally recording it with my hands. It's something that the mind can do, and it hides it. It sticks it so far back in my mind. It's such an interesting process, and I still think they probably still use this now. If you're recording something with a different part of yourself, your front personality will have no idea what you're talking about. It's literally hidden. Somebody would have to put you under a deep trance or hypnotic, hypnosis in order to debrief and obtain that information, which is totally obtainable, because I can obtain information now just on my own. So I can imagine that with a professional, reaching into your mind and grabbing that information from a child, it probably would have been easy for them to do. So that kind of went on for a short time. Um, and about around age 13, they had a different plan for me. And I ended up leaving. And the only thing I remember is how I got there. It was on a train. And I know this always sounds weird, and trust me, I know it sounds weird because it sounded weird to me first when I discovered it too. But I remember taking a train, and I remember I was being chaperoned by an older gentleman, and he was very well dressed, had a, a nice hat on and everything. And I don't remember being afraid of him, but I know I didn't talk to him or anything. And a lot of times during my young years, I didn't really talk a lot. I followed directions and that was it. I barely spoke. So I chaperoned with this man and we got on a train. It almost looked like a subway, like an underground train system, subway. And when we arrived, I knew we were on the moon and I was on level 4 underground. And that particular section of this base is where they were teaching a psionics class. And that's where I had been taken to because they had planned to put me in a psionics class to teach me profiling. It's called personality profiling, but I call it profiling. And there was a teacher and she looked really young. I would have thought that a teacher there would probably be in older, but she looked like she was in her 20s. Maybe she was older and I just couldn't tell, but she had a long dark hair and she was not happy that she had to put a child in her class because she taught a class of adults, psionics and things. And she wasn't happy that I was there because it's almost like, she's teaching a little kid, I don't know if she felt offended by that or not, but she didn't have a choice because there's something in my file that says I come from a special sector. So it's almost guaranteed that I have to do, something like this. And if they say what they say goes, since I'm from special sector. So she started teaching me, and there was other people in this class. There was a few other people. The only ones I remember ever interacting with, because they were all adults, one of them could talk to animals, and then one other person had an ability where they secreted excess moisture from their bodies, like through the skin. I don't know what they could do with it, but it was really interesting. And she was very stern and she was very direct and I want to say she was kind of hard on me. And she kind of made me feel sad a lot during that. I was not, the most confident little kid. So I know I felt kind of like nervous around her and anxious because she was so stern with me. But looking back, I appreciate it because I think in her mind, she knew that I would be in some very dangerous situations. And she felt like that was the only way to teach me, to keep me alive, is to teach me how to do this as best I can. And I always remember the one phrase she always told me, and this was always stuck in my mind, is she saying, it takes one look and one word. She said, I had to be that quick. She said, if I ever got into a situation, I had to be able to read the room that fast. I had to know what somebody was thinking by one handshake, one turn of the head, one blink of the eye. It had to be that fast. And you had to be because of what they wanted me to do. And a lot of the work they wanted me to do when I was older would involve like corporate espionage and things like that. So of course I had to be quick for that. So I appreciated now all you know, the sternness from her had a meaning, and she was doing it for a certain particular reason. It wasn't just to be mean to me. She basically kept me alive by making me good at this. So I appreciate it now. But after that, I didn't, from about 13 to about 19, I really didn't do a lot of things. I think from what I know, I looked too young to do the work that they wanted me to do. At 13, I probably looked like I was like 9 or 10, and they wanted me to be an adult to continue some of this work that they had, set aside for me. So I think around age 19 is when I started to get into like some beta type work and corporate espionage kind of things. So the particular work for beta work, I call it beta tracking. That's the term I use because that's a term I've discovered, and what they call it is beta tracking. So in beta tracking, we're assigned to a particular mark. We're given that person's name and we are supposed to infiltrate their life, possibly start a relationship with them, or a friendship, whatever they say for us to do. It's particular, you follow the directions to the T. You have to. And either you're there recording the information, gathering intelligence, or you're performing some other outcome that's directed by the agency that has contracted with you. So there was various things that we would have to do. And supposedly they said I did really well. There was a lot of dangerous stuff I had to do, dangerous things. Um, So, I mean, I don't know if you want me to talk about specific ones or do you want to just generalized?
You can, but one thing I wanted to mention
Mhm,
that was interesting is when you said, they were wanting you to record with the body in another way. And one thing I remember learning and having memory recall is when you're dealing with certain ET races
mhm.
and star seeds, if you want to call them that, or some people can call them angels. One of the things that like they show in Hollywood in some of the movies is like an angel will lick the eye and have memory of what they last saw. And that actually is true that they could do that. They could get your memories of and replay the last events that you witnessed through contact with your eyes.
Yeah, and just being a spirit host, there's so many different parts of a person you can connect with. Because when I do it, I can. So if I was going to connect with you, you have so many different pieces of you that I can connect with. Could it be your front personality? Could it be an alter? Could it be a past life, future life, parallel life? There's so many different pieces of a person to connect with. So that makes sense when you're saying they're, touching an eye because even like if I do remote influencing, I can, it's almost like putting your hands inside somebody's brain and, touching with your fingers and getting kind of a sense of what they're thinking. You look through their eyes, you feel everything, all these different parts of them. So that's very interesting too, the way they word it like that, because it is a different type of connection.
It is, and it's interesting you say seen through someone's eyes because I have a couple of times with someone that I knew really well was like almost in a trance state and I was like what are they doing? Where are they? And I was focusing on them and next thing I know it's like I could see whatever they're wherever they are. It's like whatever they saw I could see. And it like I pulled back cuz I was like, "Wait, what was this? What?" I had no training in it, so I was like confused and was like, "How did I do this? What did I just do? Did I
Yeah.
just invade someone?" And that's not cool.
Yeah, and I'm self-taught, so well, self-taught from now, obviously we were trained to do certain things in the programs that we haven't, been able to see quite yet, but it's almost like a rediscovery. I want to say a rediscovery. Just because, sometimes the things I do now, I'm pretty sure that I know for a fact there's things I can do in other past lives that are apparent now. I did want to talk about that. I don't know if we have time to do that.
Well, we can, but real quick,
Yes.
there is a question in the chat room that I think some people might benefit from.
Mhm.
Kids Hell is asking, she wants to know what's remote influencing.
Remote influencing, I can s I believe in my personal opinion, I feel like it's part of the dark arts. It's because I mean, I've done it myself when I've entered a base using remote influencing and astral travel by location. To get secret documents, and I don't feel all the time I don't feel bad because these people are they've harmed us, they've harmed people, they've harmed other children. So do I feel bad trying to trick them into giving me information? I don't really. I apologize for that, but I don't feel bad for getting information for the world. And sometimes I'll kind of impress myself onto somebody in a base to have them type and give me the information from their computer. So that's remote influencing, kind of pushing your will onto someone to give you something. So I consider it the dark arts, so I don't recommend it to people.
Right, because you can take on a lot of backlash doing that.
Yeah, I don't recommend it to people. I mean, I've done it before to get information for the world, but I'll take the risk and I'll do it myself. So I was going to talk about how when I was at the psychiatric hospital with the programmer, the woman, she was doing all these different hypnosis techniques with us. Even one of the things she would do is she would have me and the boy Jacob sit in a chair when we were in her office. She would have us put our hands up and she would put one of those acupuncture needles, a very thin needle in your palm, in the middle of your palm, and we would go into trance like that. That's how we could go into trance, is just from the that sensation from that needle in the palm. It was really interesting. But she was finding so much information just from that. And she ended up doing what I consider a referral. She did a referral for me to go and meet with this other person. So I was taken to another office, and in this office, there was a gentleman there, a very old, frail gentleman. And he was very skinny and balding pretty much all around. And he was wearing these little wire rimmed glasses. He probably looked like he was in his 90s. I wasn't sure. Um, but his name was Dr. Green. And I don't know for sure. I just know people talk about him as Dr. Green being another name for Mangala. And he was there, and he had a set of twins in his office. They were adults, though, very light-skinned adults. And he I wasn't afraid of Dr. Green. He never physically hurt me. It's just something about him was always kind of creepy. There's something creepy about him. And I don't know, it's hard to put your finger on it. Just his excitement in what he's doing, it was really strange. So he had he wanted these two people to do kind of like this exam on me, if you will, kind of like an exam. And so these two twins, they started looking in my eyes, looking in my mouth, looking all over these weird places. And they finally, when they opened my mouth and they made me say, ah, they told Dr. Green, yeah, we see it. We can see the thing inside her. And that's what they told Dr. Green about me. They said they saw the thing inside me. And what they thought they saw was something dark. They thought I was possessed. They thought I had some type of attachment, something like that, but they were wrong about what they saw in their assumptions. And that's when I was taken into this project called Project Traveler. Um, this is a project where it's actually an occult project that's tied to the government. They're trying to kind of almost like harness power behind that dark side, because that is huge power. It's like the force behind the force. We think of, just the dark side as something we see. We've learned about in books and movies. It's so much more than that, and they want to kind of take control of some of that. So they think that they can control some of these entities or something, and they thought that I had an entity attachment, but they were wrong. And that's how I was going to talk about how I got identified for this program. It was through my past lives, through the hypnosis techniques that the programmer was conducting at this particular hospital. So I was going to talk about some of the past lives and how it corresponded to actually their abuse tactics, their alter creation, and then their how they would foster the development of some of these abilities in me, to have them rediscovered in me at a later time to be used by their programs and their shadow agencies. So one of the past lives that they discovered was through me. They discovered these things through me when I was just a child in hypnosis. So one of them is when about the 1400s, it was in Italy. And I was somebody, I guess I would be considered a medium in those days in the 1400s. So I was a widow. I had two children. My husband had passed away. And, I was just trying to make it, and take care of the kids. And I had this ability, and I thought I was helping people. They would come and offer me vegetables and things like that for a trade. I would let them speak to loved ones, that had passed away. And I really thought I was doing good. I was doing a good thing, but the word got around, and somebody in the village had to, talked about what had happened and what I was doing. And these men came through our town, and they came to my house, and they punched me in the face, and they dragged me off in a wagon and took me to a dungeon. And in that dungeon, and my two little boys they had to go with my uncle, and he took them for me. And at this dungeon, they did so much torture. And I remember one of the torture methods, they were hanging me from the ceiling by my arms. And they were trying to get, like I said, get a confession about, am I conspiring with the devil and what I was doing. And I never gave them what they wanted. And I didn't die. They didn't burn me at the stake or anything. I died from starvation and dehydration, because they didn't feed us. They didn't give any water or anything like that. But I was so angry at them. And I that kind of stayed with me. That anger at those men for what they did, it stayed with me because I had that. It was only because I was a medium, so I was really angry about that. There was another life that I had, and this was one that I'm sure they saw, and they really probably felt like they could use this because there was a life where I had almost like sociopathic tendencies. It was in the 1800s. I think late 1700s, early 1800s, from what I can guess. I don't really know the time frame, but it was right around there. And I was a man in this life, and I had been living on my own a long time. I had been a street child because my parents died so young, and I traveled around. I traveled the country, going from village to village, finding work, things like that. And I actually had met somebody on my travels that was just like me. And we thought we made a partnership, and we would go and travel around, and we would do things like, you know, assault females and, you know, to meet their end sometimes, if I'm trying to say it very politically correct. We would travel around, assault women, and have them meet their end if that was our choice that day. And we had been doing that for a really long time. And like I said, I think we were both sociopaths. And we had gotten to one village, and we had gotten careless, I believe, because I don't think we thought we could get caught. We gotten careless, and we had just assaulted somebody, and we went to a local pub or tavern, and we were drinking with the local people, and somebody found this person out in the field, and they knew it was us because we were the only new people in this town. They knew who it was. And me and my partner, we ran as fast as we could. We ran to a barn, and we thought we were safe, but they ended up locking us in and set the barn on fire. So we died from being burned alive. But I really believe I deserved it in that life, and I'm glad they, made sure they burned us down because we needed that. I just remember in that life, the last thing I remember is trying to climb up into the rafters to, escape kind of like the smoke and heat, but that didn't help. Somebody asked me, do I think these are real or these were implanted? No, these are not implanted. There's no Do you know how hard it would be? Especially, I've written two full books on this. I write 2 blogs. Do you know how difficult it would be for me to make up this entire thing, hundreds of pages worth of information, be able to relay it constantly to every show I go to, and to be consistent with the information? I would have to be a literal genius to pull this off. I'm just saying that's the gist of that. There's no You'd think about that. Think about how hard and difficult that would be for a person to do that. So,
Well, that actually brings up an interesting side question, though. In my opinion, is we know being in the programs and everything with the mind control that they do and everything that there are cover memories that are put in to help block recall. How do you tell the difference
I
between
personally don't
what they
have
plant?
I don't realize, and I don't notice, I don't have an experience with cover memories. So I don't think that's a uniform thing across all mind control. I don't have any idea about cover memories. I've experienced V2K and things like that. Cover memories has not been in my personal experience. There may be other people in the programs that have had that. I particularly don't have an experience with that. So I don't have a story or an opinion on it.
Okay. And Kids on Hell was asking earlier as you were describing your what how did we term it? I want to make sure I'm on the remote influencing.
Mhm.
If there's a way that if someone's doing that, can you block it?
I actually got blocked once, and I was in a underground base in Australia. I had put my hands into someone to type out information, and I got detected very quickly because these bases are protected by their own team of remote viewers. So I call them the counter remote viewers. When I'm going to do something, I call them the counter remote viewing team. They were so quick. I was only able to do it for about 2 minutes. And she was on a computer, and right across the screen I was, literally, what I call it as like being inside someone, like possessing someone. So she was on her computer, I was making her type all these to try to get project names and things like that, and right out of the blue, this in big words flashed across her screen, and it said break screen. And as soon as she saw that, she jumped up out of her chair, and I got pushed. I almost got thrown out, like, of her, like thrown back and back to my spot where I came from. So they had detected it pretty quickly, and they said break screen right on her computer.
Okay. And ASIC 9, I think I'm pronouncing that right, was asking, I'm not familiar with ACIO. Are you?
I don't I've heard of that before, but I'm not a part of any organization. I'm
Okay.
just
And
an author trying to get information out to people.
right. And Kids Like Hell, she says, thank you for answering.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm glad I could give that information out. So I was going to continue with another past life, which is so important for me because it's given me so much. I don't even freedom. That's the word. That's the exact word. Freedom. So this past life, and this is one that they discovered, and why they put me in Project Traveler, because it was ancient times, and it was so far back that I don't even have a number for it, but I remember following someone in a desert, and I saw that he was looking for one of his sheep, and it's starting to get dark out, and he's getting a little nervous in the dark. These are the times where they built their lives around mythology and things like that. So I could tell that he was nervous out in the dark. And I crept up behind him, and I started just saying things in his ear, like, asking him where he was going in his language and things like that. And I thought it was very fun. I thought it was hilarious. It was fun. It was how I, got my entertainment. And he was terrified. He couldn't see me, but he was so scared and knew I was there. So that's kind of the thing I did in those times, and it was a very seductive time. I remember that, and it's different from the way things are different now, because in that life, I would be called what some people would consider a dark entity, or daemon, or the demonics, but I called myself a dark jinn because I was one of the jinn. And we had our own hierarchy where we were a race of beings. We weren't just, people think of like those darker entities as, I don't know, we get a lot of our information from books and movies and things, but knowing what I was, and knowing, what I experienced, it was really interesting, because I know for a fact when I was living that life and doing what I was doing, I did not know what the word evil was. I had no idea what evil was. I didn't know I was evil. And, people kind of assign that label to me, you're an evil, you're a demon and things like that. But how would I didn't even know what I was. All I knew is I did my job, and I was doing what I was supposed to do, because I had taken a role as kind of like a victimizer. I would find somebody, infiltrate their life, you know, oppress them. And my main goal was to take their whole life over and wait for them to allow me to take over their body so I could destroy their life in any way I could. And that's what my job was. And I thought I was doing a good thing because I was giving people what they wanted. In my dark gin mind, I thought I was doing what people wanted, because they did call out to me. You think that people don't call out to these beings? They do all the time. We call it a heart call. We call it the beckoning. When somebody calls to us, you go to them. And that's what I would do. If somebody called to me, I would go to them, because I feel like, oh, they want me to take over their life. They want to break. And in the jinn mind, I thought that I was supposed to do that, because when people want that experience of darkness, I came to give it to them. I was doing my role in my job of what I was supposed to be doing here on earth. So it was like me being able to find this particular experience of mine led me to a lot of freedom, because I know it's so hard for people to realize and to acknowledge that they had done some bad things in the past. It's very difficult to do that. You have to be a specific, it's very difficult. Trust me, to acknowledge your own darkness, that shadow inside yourself. It's very hard to find. It's very hard to acknowledge. And it's given me so much freedom to just say and be able to say that I was a dark entity, and I was being able to do that. So that was one of the lives that they found, and that they thought was so important to their projects, because it could be used for so many different things. All these occult projects that the government are tied to, they need people like me somebody that can host other spirits, somebody that can be a trance medium, somebody that I can. So it's like I I'm still able to possess people. That's why the ability has been rediscovered in me, is because as a jinn, I was able to possess people. And I can do that now. And I can also allow people to possess me. So what I do is spirit hosting, and I consider it a form of voluntary possession. That's because of my past lives, I can still do this. So if I put myself into a deep enough trance and it doesn't harm me, I don't recommend this to other people. I don't want anybody else to try this. I go into such a deep trance that I'm able to open myself up, and I can allow pretty much anything to take over my body and speak. And that's how I get a lot of information, is by allowing certain things to speak to me, speak through me. And they can, and it's not definitely not a channeling. I don't want anybody to think I'm a channeler. I'm not. I'm a spirit host, and actually entities are the ones that taught me that word. That's how I have that word, is because they told me that's what I am, that I'm a host. So I call it hosting. So I've had so many experiences of hosting various beings. And it's not just, I don't just allow the demonic. I've allowed various religious figures, historical figures. I've been able to, talk to my own father, handlers. you know, I can go back in the past and view memories, view past lives of other people, see them on different planets. I can go there. It's such a really cool ability to have in order to obtain information for people. It's really interesting to be able to do this. So I don't get harmed physically, emotionally, or mentally or psychologically by this. So it's a little bit easier for me to do things than probably somebody else.
It's interesting hearing this because you just triggered a memory in me, and it's like you're saying, going to sound strange because I was doing a future regression,
Hmm.
which the reason that sounds strange is because what I'm about to say now, I wonder if was the past, because being in the programs, we understand time in a loop, not a linear line. So the past could be in the future and present all at the same time. And what it was I was a part of a team that I was leading, and we would go through time. And the suit I was wearing at the time, I didn't know how to describe it, but now I would say is the nano suit.
Hmm.
And we would instantly be able to communicate with everybody. We would automatically talk their language, and it would automatically translate their language into our language. And so we were able to communicate as if we had always been there, and our outfits would adapt to, like, you're saying, being in the desert nomadic,
Hmm.
robes. We would appear in the robes, even though that's not what we were wearing. And so it's interesting because now I wonder, was that the past being in a program, and my mind in the regression didn't know how to comprehend it, so it made it look like it was in the future.
I would trust trust yourself over that. I wouldn't put any doubt in your mind. If you were in a tied to your highest self, like I do when I go under and do trance, I attach to my highest self. I reach out to my highest self. That's why I trust what I experience. So if I was you, I would trust your experience and don't question yourself. That would be my take on it. Definitely don't question yourself, because if you're attached to your highest self, I think what you're experiencing is real, and you know best. You're the expert in your own life.
Right. And that's why I was like, it sounded so similar to what you were doing. And that's why I started to think, wait, could it be I was actually looking at the past?
It could be all those. I remember I've been to the in-between place. In my experience, I call it the in-between place. And that's where I go and meet my spirit guide after I die. He took me to the in-between place after I was one of the past lives I had. I was trying to go to I was supposed to be in the Revolutionary War, and I died on a horse before I got there. But my spirit guide called me to the in between place. And when I got there, we were kind of like laughing and giggling. It wasn't like a stressful thing. I kind of had that earth anxiousness at first, and I kept telling him I was hungry, and he kept saying, "You're not hungry. There's no hunger here." He thought it was funny that I kept saying I was hungry. He said, "You're not hungry here. There's no hunger here." And he just said, "Where do you want to go next?" He's like, "That was really interesting. Do you want to go forward? Do you want to go backward? You can go anywhere." So he said, "I can do anything I want." And that was in the in between place when we're thinking about going to jobs. It's my choice, going to lives and things. He said, "It was my choice. I don't have to do anything. But do you want to go somewhere? What do you think?" He said, "What do you think about that life?" And I was like, I can't believe, I was embarrassed. I said, "I can't believe I died before I even got to the war. I died on a horse. And I was able to let that horse speak through me. It sounds crazy, trust me, I know, but it was so freeing because the horse told me, because I have a phobia of like speed and heights. The horse said, "You don't have to be afraid of that." He said, "Because your fear is because you died going very fast." But he said, that's not in your lifetime now. You can let that go, kind of, to try to help me get past like my phobia of it. Because it stays with you. It doesn't matter if it's hundreds or thousands of years. It stays with you at the cellular level. That's why I still have that jinn part inside me, because it stays with you. But I was going to talk about one more past life that I saw,
Mm,
and this one was really
yeah.
interesting.
Real
And this,
quick, there is a
yeah, go ahead.
question about past lives
Hmm.
that I think you might be the one to help answer. Linda Judd says, "I've wondered if people with split personalities are experiencing past lives being present within their now."
I would guess that everyone is experiencing some type of situation of their past lives, because it's still with you. You just have to go look for it. I don't think you don't have to be in the programs. You don't have to have MK Ultra to be able to find your past lives or do this. I think it's in everybody to find that. But the last life I was going to talk about is, and they thought this was important for them in order to me to be perfectly mind controlled. It was ancient times again, and I was a male, and I remember seeing myself just constantly walking. There was sand everywhere, and all of us, there was this whole civilization. All we did was walk and move sand, walking and move sand. And if I can look far away at the scene, on top of a pyramid, there was this giant, like, I call them the dog people, because I don't know what to call them. I call them the dog people. There was just one of them, and he was huge. He was just standing there, and he had a staff, and none of us made eye contact with each other. All of us, we were just like, almost like, I call them like automatons. We just like, or almost like robots. We just kept walking. It was just, this is how powerful these beings are. One person controlled that entire population. One dog person controlled all of us. And what we were doing, he wanted us to make something called a flash portal. And I don't necessarily remember what they were going to do with the flash portal, but they had made a law that we couldn't use it. It was something for them, you know. And I was like, why couldn't we use it? It was because we would be, too strong or something, and would take them down or whatever. But it was such a really dark life, very short life, because most of us just died, and we would die on the steps because nobody was eating or drinking or anything. And he was just using us up until we die. And they were making their pyramids that way, just using people constantly, making these flash portals too. But those beings, when I looked at him, I looked at the inside of his body with my ability, and in his stomach, he was controlled by something himself. There was almost like this glob of worms, black worms, like sentient thing inside of his solar plexus area. So he was the host for something else that I don't even think he knew that it was in there. It was something else was hosting that. So it was really interesting to see that this giant dog person was he was being controlled by something else. I don't think he realized what it was happening, but we were to make those. But so in that life, I saw what it meant to be completely controlled, to not have a life for myself. Just everything was controlled for me. And the programmers in MK Ultra, they saw that I could be completely controlled because I had been inside me at a cellular level. I had done this before. They used everything they found with my past lives, everything from hypnosis, in order to program me. Any type of trauma that they saw, they tried to recreate it within that psychiatric hospital. We had this section that we called the playroom that we spent most of our time in. And it looked like a regular kids playroom at, early 70s style, whatever. Looked like a normal playroom, but that's where they did a lot of their torture and abuse techniques and things like that. And it was just so strange to see them utilize that. And then they would do some of the trauma techniques from the deaths that they saw me have: fire, being hanged from a ceiling, being starved and not given water. They used all that against me as a child because my body would respond to that. My mind, my subconscious, my cellular level responded to those traumas. It double sealed the trauma for them. That's how I got so good at dissociating, because it's a double trauma. It's like your body can remember, I've already died like this before. I've already experienced this trauma, and here it's back again. They used all the same techniques in order to double seal that trauma in me and create a perfect, like, mind controlled individual that would be able to work for them and do a lot of different jobs.
Wow, and that's actually, really interesting. And I'll share with you something real quick that I thought was kind of a little unique to me, and find it interesting to hear like you have an aspect of it yourself. Is when I'm on the astral plane and I'm going and doing whatever I'm doing, either by choice or being directed to, if I hear someone call my name, I'm there in a flash. Like, no
That's how quick
time.
it is. It's very
Yeah.
much in a I agree with that. I call it a whoosh. You call it a flash, I call it a whoosh.
And I like to tell people is like I've seen a couple of times when I do, like I can sense what's going on. Like if someone's in trouble and if they're in a cave, I'll be like, I'll take like a nanosecond and go, how can I make the most dramatic entrance? Go right through the rock, the top of the cave, into the opening where they're at, hit the ground, and then walk up and kind of brush it off and look at the person, ignore who's the threat, and go, are you okay? And then turn and look at them, and it's like, I've seen this. Or the other one that I've done is just appear out of thin air and be like, what's up?
Right.
What do you need? And so it's like, I wonder, do you ever see how you make your entrance, so to speak?
Yeah, I think, what people should know that sometimes I personally, when I'm doing remote viewing and astral traveling, I call it psi remote viewing because it's a psychic ability. Not I'm not using coordinates like people do, like mainstream. It's a psychic ability. Call it psi remote viewing, and I use astral travel and bilocation all mixed together. And I want to tell people that if you think you're seeing shadow people, sometimes those are me and other remote viewers. We look like shadow people because I particularly use the ghost dimension to travel when I'm doing astral travel. So I can see ghosts, they see me. I've gone to, like, try to remote view a handler division. I went into the handler's house. His grandmother, when I arrived behind him, I was standing behind him. I looked in the corner. His dead grandmother was there, and she saw me and I saw her. So it's really interesting that I'm using it's almost like seeing a ghost sometimes. Sometimes you hear noises and things. It's possible. I'm not saying every time, but it's possible it could be a remote viewer.
That's interesting. And I know we had talked about before we started that we had an hour for tonight, and unfortunately, we are like 4 minutes from the hour.
Yeah, we're gonna
So,
have to do a part two because I barely even scratched. We didn't even get to talk about Mars or any of the different things like that. I haven't even gotten to the part where I could talk about Mars. We'll have to do a part two sometime. If people are interested, obviously.
oh, I'm interested.
Yeah.
So, People can
Yeah.
join along for the ride or choose not to,
Yeah,
but
so
I'm
next time
choosing for a part 2.
yeah, I can talk about next time. We'll talk about how I got into corporate espionage, and I did a lot of this is weird. I did human resources work on Mars. I wasn't fighting aliens. I worked in an office. But when you work in an office, you get to see a lot of people, you get to see the comings and goings. So I have a lot of information about how the workings of that base happened.
Well, and one thing I like to share with people is, when they talk about, "Oh, you were in the program, so you must know so and so."
No, I don't know
I
anybody.
I like to tell people, I go, "You realize in the programs you have your pilots, you have your crew that may do cleanup, type of work, you
Hmm.
have your command crew, you have your on Earth only crew, only operate in space crew. We don't always get, together at lunch and hang out and be like, hey, what'd you do today?"
Right. Nobody hung out with me because I worked for the man. Nobody wanted to be around me. I wasn't around a lot of people because I had a higher level job in the corporate sector. I remember the general I worked for, though, General Asher. So, but I don't remember a lot of the officers or things like that. I remember General Asher, though. He was my boss.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on and
Yeah, thank
sharing
you.
with us. And thank you to everyone in the chat room. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. Normally we have time to try and get to more, but we have to respect the time. And I am so grateful and appreciative. And so I am looking forward to part 2. So I will let you all know when we schedule that and arrange that. And
Yeah, there's a
I
lot of
just,
topics I want to talk about next time. I want to talk about Mars. There's new things happening like the Olympia group. There's Project Oblivion that we need to speak about where their podcasters are getting targeted. So much information. So I hope everybody hops back onto the second show so we can discuss some of the current events that we need to discuss for disclosure.
yes. And thank you for stepping up. And I know you say you're just an author sharing, and looking for stuff. But as someone recently said to me, I'm not just a podcaster. So don't limit yourself and limit your importance. You are a very important aspect to what's going on. And so, from my heart to yours, thank you for coming forward
Yeah,
and
thank you.
sharing. And with that, we are going to say good night. And let me see. They keep changing the settings. There they are. And I will sign us out. So thank you, everyone, and stay tuned for part 2. Good night.